to do some homework this week, and I knew it was going to be tedious. But sometimes tedious is nice. It's a good excuse to slow down. If it's got to get done anyway, I may as well do something intentional with it. So let's slow down and do something intentional. I was really intimidated when I picked up traditional art at first, because I've only ever worked digitally. I use a tablet. That's one tool, as opposed to every goddamn little thing that you need to make one drawing analog. That's part of why I keep so many of my analog videos, the cassette videos. I spend so much time showing off what exactly I'm using. It's not like I'm sponsored or that it matters. It's just, my God, traditional artists just don't think about how many moving parts there are compared to, what the rest of us are doing. I'll spend like a week trying to solve the puzzle of how to get a particular effect, and I'm using like the complete wrong equipment for it, and then I look it up in some Reddit thread somewhere, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, there's a tool that does exactly this. There's a bottle of liquid that will do this thing that you need it to do, and you get hung up on this one step. It would have taken 5 seconds in Clip Studio, and I don't have to buy anything. Traditional art is just buying things. People talk about traditional art like, well, this is the real thing, and the rest of it is just practice. Like it's this necessary step to understanding how art works. While you're fucking around digitally, you're not really learning. I've met a lot of people who don't really respect digital even as a valid method of creating, as if it doesn't require as much discipline. The computer does the art for you. And one day, if you keep practicing, you'll graduate to pen and paper. I think I'd kind of internalized a lot of that. Like, oh fuck, you're right. I've thrown my lot in with the wrong side, and that's just not a thing that's accessible to me now. My brain doesn't work that way. My hands don't work that way. That's not something I can do. Now that I'm actually making attempts at it, it's been a lot easier than I was expecting it to be. Which I'm sure is a fun thing to hear while we're watching me use the wrong amount of water, or hold the brush incorrectly, or brush in the wrong way, or whatever ignorance shows in my technique here. But I found that traditional mediums sort of do a lot of the work for you in a way that digital art doesn't. I haven't been doing it for very long, so my perspective is fairly limited compared to digital art. I've found that the things that make traditional art difficult, comparatively, is homework. Having to sit there and do every little individual brush stroke, taking 20 minutes that I could have just used a fill tool to finish in one click digitally, so that I could move on to the actual stuff that requires attention. And I kind of wonder if that's why people prioritize traditional art more, because it's more painful. There's more suffering in traditional art. And it's not necessarily suffering. Sometimes the process is pleasant on its own, which is a thing that I've been enjoying about it. I understand why people do studies, even if they're not specifically trying to learn to do something. It's just a pleasant thing to engage in, to paint something, and figure out how the light works. But it's a very different process than, in my case, I draw comics to tell a story. There's a goal there. But traditional art doesn't really have a goal for me. I just am doing it to do it. But I don't know, man. I don't feel like art is supposed to be painful. That's a very Catholic way to look at things. I think if your definition of art requires pain to validate it, like, I don't know, dude. You should probably sit with that. But going back to traditional mediums doing a lot of the work for you, I think it was on some, Disney bonus disc or something I watched years ago where one of the animators at Pixar was discussing getting texture on skin or programming rain falling on characters, and he said, you don't get anything for free. Anything that you get out of a digital piece is something that you had to intentionally put there. Which I like, because I am a control freak. I very much enjoy having complete control over every little bit of the image. Which may not always be obvious, since I am usually drawing as fast as I can all the time. So the majority of my work is the fastest thing that I could call finished and get posted. And that's okay. That's a thing that I'm alright with. In traditional, you give up so much control to the tools. The way the paint moves on the paper, or, this is what I had at the time. I didn't have this color marker that day, so I was beholden to what was in the palette. There's just so much stuff that comes naturally with tangible art that I have really been enjoying figuring out. I like getting my hands on things. I don't have this hang up about originals that a lot of people do when they're discussing the merits between digital and analog art. Digital space is very real to my brain. I grew up on the internet. I grew up in computers, so the digital space where my art lives exists to me in a way that it doesn't seem to for a lot of other people. I like machines and digital things, so I don't have this sense of loss. It's not ephemeral to me, so it's not like a thing that I have an issue with, that digital art is not tangible. But it is a novelty that I'm enjoying with analog art. Colors that I can hold. These watercolors, I called it homework earlier, but I really enjoy the process of putting colors in space so that I can look at them. I could do paint swatches all day, I think. It's funny, I have never enjoyed inking. It's my least favorite part of drawing. It's the thing that I have to do to get to the color, which is the part that I do like. But I like inking traditionally. It's more responsive, I guess. I don't get so lost in the details because the ink is gonna go where it's gonna go. And there's only so much that I can do about that. Which is a skill issue. All of these things that I'm saying are things that you would pick up if you had been drawing with these tools longer than 6 months. But so far, my attempts at traditional art have been collaborations with the tools, more than me dictating to them exactly what I want. When I'm working digitally, I feel like my PC itself is my collaborator that has every other tool on offer. But traditional work, every different tool that I have to use is a collaborator. They all have different personalities and opinions, and learning how to work with them. It is also expensive. I could not have possibly made as much Kid Commander, as many comic pages as I have made if I was having to buy Bristol board and ink and brushes and pencils and every single tool that goes into making a full color comic like Kid Commander. There's just no way. Every little piece just costs so much money over time, and when you multiply that by the scope of the project, it just would have been impossible. There's no way that the project could support itself if it was costing that much to produce. I like that the driving force in the length of a chapter or what gets included or cut in my work is not based on what I can afford. But I think it can be a good thing. The inverse, the positive aspect of traditional art being what it is, where every canvas costs money, is that you learn to work under that sort of weight. Everything that you do has more weight behind it, and learning how to commit under that kind of pressure, I think, is a good skill to have because it builds your confidence as an artist. But that's a paywall to creating things. And it also boxes in the project itself, like what you can and can't do with your art. If I sit down at a digital canvas, I can do anything. There's absolutely no limit to the number of times that I can try something. I can experiment as much as I want without destroying the piece. And once I decide on the direction that I want to take the piece in, I've explored all the other options. So I'm sure that this is the way that I want to go with it. With traditional art, even the limited stuff that I've done so far, there have already been times where I had to commit to something that I wouldn't be sure of until it was in front of me, and then I'm looking at it later like, man, what if I'd used a different color? What if I tried a different medium? Bugs me. I think two things can be true at once. Learning to work both digitally and traditionally really rounds out an artist in a way that sticking with one or the other wouldn't. Everybody was right, you should learn both, but I think we're just kind of missing the point on what there is to learn in each medium. It doesn't actually have anything to do with technique, it's learning to think. Learning to be sure about your decisions is a thing that you can pick up more easily working traditionally. And working digitally gives you the freedom to experiment without consequences. I think learning to work within constraints can really sharpen certain skills for an artist. But I think you can do that a little too much. Again, art is not suffering. It's not supposed to hurt. If you're limiting yourself, it should be because you choose to do so, to serve yourself. It shouldn't be because someone else decided that those limits should be there and you've outgrown them and they're uncomfortable for the sake of being